Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join in this week's episode. Now, in this week's episode, we have got a fantastic mixture of techniques, stuff that I've talked about previously, stuff that I haven't talked about, but we're going to mash it all together and make one fantastic, easy to use technique to create fantastic high impact blonde results. But in this particular instance, we're going to tone it all pink at the end just for a bit of fun and just to make my client's hair a little bit different from the everyday blonde balayage that we've seen over and over again. Now I know pink isn't new, but it is nice to do these things every now and again just to spice things up in the salon. I'm sure you'll totally agree when you get those clients that just want something different. They want to be braver and bolder. I think pink is a great colour for lots of people to wear, young or old. It doesn't really matter. I think pink is one of those colours that can be tailor-made, customised to any age group. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and if you do, then please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you're here and you're new to the channel, and if you would like to know any more about the Life of Hair education, then you can also become a Patreon, which is linked down in the description. If you've got any thoughts or questions you'd like to ask me about that, then you can find me on Instagram at the Life of Hair 1. If you hit the thumbs up button on this video, it does it an enormous boost in telling the YouTube algorithm that this video is a good video and other people need to see it. So please do me the favour of smashing that thumbs up button. It does actually mean something. Until next time, guys, I'll see you again very, very soon. Okay, so today's technique is a very, very, very grown out, previously balayage look. So grown out, in fact, it's effectively just a dip dye on the very ends at the moment. So we're dealing with a natural level 7, going into a level 9. It's gone quite yellowy, but it hasn't been done for a really long time. So we really want to pump some blonde back into the hair and really make it a lot brighter. Section very simple, rectangular section on the top here, 2 rectangular sections on the side, and then a crescent shaped section dropping down into behind the back of the ears. The technique that we're going to use today, I have talked about it before, but it's a ribbon weave freehand hand blended balayage technique, and it's literally one of my favorite techniques. I had stopped using it for a while because I was trying, experimenting, and always trying to better other techniques. So you can't keep using the ones that you really enjoy if you need to get better at other techniques or try other techniques. So I was really chuffed to be able to do this again. It was just the right technique for the job, and it was time to crack this one out again. And I just love doing it. I especially love doing it because I don't use a brush. There's no brush application in this particular technique. So I'm going to talk you through the technique as we go through the video and different things that you need to look at and understand when you're doing this technique. But honestly, guys, it is so much fun. And for those of you that are a bit like stiff with the old brush and you kind of find balayaging a little bit kind of too free, it's not regimented enough like foils, well, this technique will make you feel like applying it with a brush is definitely a step down from this. This is completely letting go of all your inhibitions and just putting colour on the hair and blending it with your hands. So you've been watching me do this first section. I haven't really talked very much about this application. Just really wanted you to watch this first section while I talk about it later. But it's a great technique. So I'm going to tell you all about it now. We've got a 1.5 to 2 inch deep section here, and we're holding the hair down towards the ends of the hair and weaving through the kind of 2/3 of the way from the root area towards the end. So we're weaving through the ends of the hair effectively, and this will create very deep troughs, V-shaped sections back at the root area that are very, very diffused. So there's not going to be very defined little V's there. It's just going to be a very diffused weave, and you want it to be like that, especially on these sections lower down on the head. We've got quite chunky sections here, and that's important to get maximum coverage on these sections that are lower down below the occipital bone. As we work further up the head, we'll make our sections slightly smaller for diffusion, but I'll talk about that when we get there. So The next step then is to pop your hand in the bowl, pick up some product and apply it approximately at the point of which you weave the hair, probably a third of the way down the length of the hair from the ends, or 2/3 away from the head, the scalp. Work it into the hair, apply your saturation and work down towards the ends. Now I've got some previously pre-lightened hair here to deal with, but I'm kind of ignoring that to a greater degree because I know, one, I'm going to cut a lot of it off, and number two, I'm not using a really high volume peroxide with my bleach here. I'm just using 20 volume because the hair is obviously not very dark in the first place. Now you can do this on very dark hair types. What I would say is you're not going to get huge amounts of lift, probably maximum 4 to 5 levels of lift from this particular technique. But I am putting foil there just to kind of protect it, stop it drying out. Remember, when the foil is away from the scalp, it doesn't provide any more heat or incubation to the hair. It is just simply at a point of which it's creating one, separation from the hair underneath, and two, it's preventing it from drying out. So let's talk about the actual application now, the nitty gritty, the blending part, which is the fun bit, of course. Before we get to that, I just want to reiterate that at this point in the technique, while we're still in the occipital bone area, the weave depth is still quite chunky. Anyway, get your hand in the bowl, get your product, pop it on, work it towards the ends of the hair. Once you've stretched out some of your product, you can then go in with your hand. You're applying a reasonable amount of pressure to the hair, but you are literally just distributing and blending the product further towards the root area. You don't want to apply excessive pressure to the hair because this will then push the product through the hair, and then you'll get product in places of which you can't blend it. So you just want to be brushing the surface of the hair nice and smooth, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. It is a really beautifully therapeutic thing to do once you get your head into the game. Now obviously you've got the underneath side of the section to think about, so you do want to make sure you kind of use that backhanding technique to evenly distribute any product that is underneath the section, because if you don't, then it becomes a little bit of a kind of splodgy mess underneath there, and you do really need to be careful of that. So remember that this is a 3D thing. It's got two sides to it, or a 2D thing. It's got two sides to it. So you've got to be really, really aware of that back side of the section. Simple, easy way to put it into a foil without having a really long foil. Just wind it around your fingers to the point of which you've saturated it, and then pop another foil on top. So I'm just going to show you this final section here. We've worked our way up towards the top of that kind of crescent section that drops down to the back of the ears. This is slightly finer, weaving from exactly the same place, 3/4 of the way down the hair, but our weaves have become a little bit finer. It's very simple, just obviously reduce the kind of bulk of your weave. You could do this all the way through if you wanted a very, very soft and very, very diffused look all the way through, but I wanted maximum coverage on those underneath sections so that I could get the most amount of blonde in that particular area. Now what I would recommend is, once you're working through the side sections, is that you reduce the depth of your sections slightly. So in this instance, I'm probably around 1 inch, 1.5 inches, rather than kind of the 2.5 inches on those bottom sections that I was doing previously. And you want to be working with that kind of slightly finer weave. Now you still want it chunky enough to create definition and separation. Remember, you're trying to create that lived in blonde balayage effect. So you don't want to be too delicate with this technique. You do still want to kind of create a little bit of contrast and separation. But as you can see here, you know, we're going in, we're applying the product to the hair 3/4 of the way down from the root area, working our saturation through. Once we've spread the product out, we're then blending the product up towards the roots. This is a fantastic exercise in control of saturation. One of the things that I highly, highly, highly recommend that you learn to do, just generally, controlling the saturation, whether it be in a highlights, balayage, scalp bleach, you name it, root shadow, is an incredibly important and valuable skill to learn. And the more ways you can learn to control saturation, the more ways you can learn to control saturation, the better. So it's really a fantastic skill to learn this without the brush. You know, take the brush away, because it's just, the brush is just someone told us that we should apply tint or color or bleach with a brush. Someone told you that, you believe them, I believe them, we go off, we did this, and then many moons later I decided that the brush, well, I'd had enough of the brush. So now what we're going to do is take a section that runs through the top, that rectangle section. We're going to split at the crown, high point of the head, a horizontal section, and we're going to mix two techniques now. We're going to mix foiling with freehand balayage. So we're going to put our foils in first so that we can get them nice and neatly into the hair. And we're doing kind of a micro stitch. It's not quite a baby light, but it's pretty fine. And it's just to create some diffusion right up at the root area, because we're going to put a money piece technique in around the face, but we're going to put a slightly different money piece technique into probably ones that I've done for a little while. I have talked about this once before on the channel, but anyway, we'll save that for just a minute's time. Now, as I say, the foils are super straightforward. For those of you who have seen me foil before, I do like to have that flap at the back for security, so I can make sure that my foils don't slip and bleed. And I'll always heavily saturate the product in the foil to get maximum performance out of my lightener. So we're still sticking with 20 volume and blue powder bleach on these sections. So nothing specifically changed in this particular area of the head. We're doing exactly what we did previously. We're just doing a few foils. I'll talk to you a little bit about how I put my foils in, just for the sake of those of you who have never seen it. In this particular instance, I've taken a section of probably 1 inch in depth, fine slice, weave that section to create a micro type stitch. Once I've done that, then I'll pick up my foil, I'll lay my tail comb on the bottom of my foil, and I'll fold it round, push it into the bottom of the section, pull down, saturate, fold by a third again, secure with the flap at the back, and fold my edges if necessary. I've always done it like that. Some people ask me why I don't have pre-folded foils, and I find that I like the control of being able to adjust the size of the foil and the size of the flap dependent on what I need for my specific client's hair type, rather than having something that is pre-folded and leaving me with kind of little to no choice as we go forward. Now, because we've got the camera now mounted to me again, unlike the other camera angle that we saw earlier, it's going to be a great opportunity for you guys to be able to see the kind of size of the smaller weaves that I was taking further up the head when doing the freehand technique. So this is going to give you a better insight into that kind of size of weave, and it's probably about 5 to 6 mils wide each individual weave, and you can also kind of get a better look at exactly how to do the hand blending part of this technique. And as I said previously, you just grab the product, pop it 2/3 of the way down the hair away from the scalp, blend your saturation through, really saturate the hair really well through those ends, get it all worked in to make sure you've got even saturation at the point of which you want the hair to be the blondest, and then take that product on the surface of the hair, the top surface and the underneath, and blend it with the palm of your hand, distributing the product smoothly and evenly. I'm not looking for a specific change in the depth of the product that's on the top of the hair, but what you're not looking to do is to push it all the way through the section. You do need a certain amount of distance, probably about 3 or 4 inches from the point of which you saturated the hair fully, to blend it back up towards the root area. That is very important to remember, and will make this technique very successful if you follow those simple rules. So we're onto the front sections now. We have put our highlights in, and then in between each of the highlights that we put in, we went back and did that freehand technique in between each and every section, just so you know where we're at. So the top will be lovely and blonde. It will have some highlights right back to the root, but it will also have those diffused freehand balayage, lived in blonde, freehand technique going in between each of those sections. Now this is the money piece. You've probably seen me do a money piece before. They're very popular and I do lots of them. This is a particularly easy technique to follow. A very fine slice at the front for your first section, and then each subsequent section after that is a very fine weaved foil for another 3 foils behind the first one. 4 foils in total. But then the hair that was left out in between each of those foils will be teased back to the foils, saturated heavily. Now, guys, watch this carefully because this is a killer tip, and one that when I was showing it, I was just like, night and day. What a difference. So, tipping the ends out, as some people would call it, get the ends, tease them back to the foil, print your product onto your foil as you just saw me do there. Place the foil behind the section, put another foil on top and flip it over. And if you look underneath the section, I put a ton of product on this section, but because it's a thick section, it hasn't managed to penetrate all the way through the section. So it's really, really super, super important that you remember to flip the foil over to ensure you've got even saturation all the way through. It will make a huge, enormous difference to how this section turns out. The reason I've done it this way for this particular instance is you're going to see in just a second. Right at the end of this video, I'm going to show exactly why I tipped out the front in this particular manner. I'm not going to spoil it. You can see it for yourself. But I mean, this particular section really screams, you know, why it's important to do this technique and flip it over and saturate the underneath of that section. Because remember, if your sections are more than a few millimeters thick, then it's difficult to get the product all the way through the section. Now I've pre-toned that hair, just so you know, so you can see why I'm looking at that. I just pre-toned it to a nice even blonde. I used a 10VG violet gold shade to neutralize any unwanted warmth, but keep it nice and soft. So when I put this pink over it, it turned out really, really soft and beautiful. So here's the finished result. A really, really pretty soft pink shade. Loads more colour in her hair, loads and loads more colour. This pink will fade away and leave her with a much more natural lived in blonde effect, or balayage effect, whatever you want to call it. I just love pink hair. I don't know why. I'm a big fan of pink hair. Now you're about to see why we did that tipping out technique. So we've got that beautiful diffused face frame money piece around the top there, but because we tipped it out, it's created that beautiful high impact pink piece right at the front there. And for me, having that added feature really, really makes this whole thing just pop and jump right off the screen. And even if it was blonde, it would just be really strong and striking around that face shape. But because it's pink, it jumps right off the screen, and I absolutely loved doing this technique. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you've taken away some tips and tricks for you to use on your clients to make your day a little bit easier behind the chair. And until next time, look after yourself, and I'll see you in another episode of The Life of Hair.